1513, a penniless exiled diplomat called Niccolò Machiavelli penned something so unsettling about human nature that the Catholic Church outlawed it. Political leaders denounced it, and his very name became a byword for evil across the following 500 years. Not because his writings were false, but because they were so painfully, irrefutably accurate that they endangered every reassuring illusion people maintained about loyalty, love, and human decency. What Machiavelli noticed had nothing to do with politics or rulers. It concerned fundamental human psychology at work in every relationship you currently have with your partner, your friends, your family, your co-workers, everyone. And once you grasp what he truly recorded, you will never view people the same way again. You will never trust the same way again. You will never be caught off guard by betrayal again. Because here is what no one mentions about Machiavelli. He was not instructing people to be evil. He was exposing the evil, or more precisely, the self-interested nature already present in every human heart, including yours. And those who condemned him did so because they employed the very techniques he outlined while claiming to act from nobler principles. Today, we are diving deep into what Machiavelli truly observed about human nature. Not the warped version you have been told. The genuine observations that explain why your closest friend vanished when you needed them most. Why your partner's affection dissolved when circumstances shifted. Why your family's support arrived with hidden conditions attached. Why your co-workers smiled while sabotaging you. This is not theory. This is pattern recognition regarding human behavior that has persisted for thousands of years and functions right now in every interaction you have. The sole question is whether you will perceive it clearly or continue pretending everyone around you acts from better motives than they truly do. The forbidden observation. Let me share Machiavelli's precise words composed in exile after being tortured and stripped of everything he had built. Men are ungrateful, fickle, dishonest, cowardly, greedy, and so long as you prosper, they belong to you entirely. They will pledge their blood, possessions, life, and children when the danger remains far off. But when danger draws near, they turn on you. Read those words once more. Notice how they strike you. Observe the resistance rising within. The inner voice insisting that is too cynical. That does not apply to everyone. I am different. My people are not that way. That resistance is precisely what Machiavelli anticipated. He wrote, "Everyone perceives what you appear to be. Few discover what you truly are." Humans are remarkably adept at sustaining public displays of loyalty and virtue while privately operating from sheer self-interest. But here is what renders this observation brutal rather than merely cynical. Machiavelli counted himself within this assessment. He was not declaring other people selfish while positioning himself as noble. He was stating that all humans, himself included, function primarily from self-interest, and that acknowledging this remains the only path to navigating reality effectively. The test that confirms his accuracy. Consider your closest relationships right now. The people you are most confident love you without conditions. Now conduct this thought experiment. You lose everything. Your wealth, your standing, your appearance, your health, your talents, everything that renders you valuable or enjoyable to have around. You become a liability rather than an asset. How many people remain? Be truthful. That number, that small, unsettling number, reveals the reality of human loyalty. Everyone else remains for what you offer, not for who you are at your essence. This is not a condemnation. It is a description. And once you embrace it, you can finally construct relationships on realistic foundations rather than romantic fantasies that crumble the instant they face testing. Machiavelli devoted decades to studying humans under duress in warfare, in political upheaval, in moments where survival hinged on loyalty. And what he recorded was a pattern so reliable, it could be considered a law of nature. Every human bond operates fundamentally on self-interest, even when people sincerely believe they are driven by pure love, loyalty, or selflessness. This is the essential truth that transforms everything. Not that people are wicked or that love is fictional, but that human attachment is perpetually rooted in what the other person delivers. The provision could be emotional, practical, social, sexual, financial, or psychological, but it is always present. And when the provision ceases, attachment vanishes. Observe this pattern within your own experience. The friend who disappeared. You shared a close friendship for years. Then conditions shifted. You relocated, switched careers, entered a relationship, or ceased being enjoyable because life grew difficult. Suddenly, they were too occupied to sustain the friendship. What took place? You ceased providing whatever advantage sustained their interest. Perhaps you were amusing. Perhaps you were helpful. Perhaps you offered social connections. When that advantage vanished, so did they. The partner who grew distant. You were deeply in love. They declared you were their everything. Then you lost your position or became depressed or failed to meet their needs in some essential way. The love that appeared eternal dissolved within months. What took place? The exchange sustaining the relationship grew uneven. You were consuming more than you were contributing. And human psychology will not endure that imbalance forever. The family member who only reaches out when they want something. They haven't contacted you in months or years. Then they hit a rough patch. Financial, emotional, practical. Suddenly they recall your existence. Once the crisis ends, they vanish again. This pattern isn't rare. It's standard. Family bonds that seem unconditional are frequently relationships where the exchange is less visible but equally present. The coworker who grew distant. You were once close at work, then you switched departments or they were promoted or your careers went separate ways. The friendship that appeared real evaporated instantly. Why? Because proximity, shared interests, and mutual professional advantage sustained the friendship. Strip away those elements and the relationship had no standalone foundation. Machiavelli would examine each of these situations and say, "Of course, what did you expect?" He noted that princes who believed their subjects loved them personally were stunned when those same subjects embraced invading forces that promised improved conditions. The love was never directed at the prince. It was directed at what the prince delivered. Your relationships function the same way. The love isn't directed at you. It's directed at what you offer. And once you grasp this, you stop being wounded by betrayals that were simply people following their nature when the exchange ceased benefiting them. The three core truths. Now, let's examine the specific mechanisms. Machiavelli identified these as the patterns operating beneath every human relationship, whether people recognize them or not. Truth 1. People remain for benefits, not bonds. Machiavelli wrote men love according to their own will and fear according to the will of the prince. Translation: people's affection is governed by their own needs and desires, but their respect responds to your power and enforcement of boundaries. This distinction is essential. Affection is what people feel when you benefit them. Respect is what people show when you've demonstrated you won't accept poor treatment. Most people conflate the two and wonder why those who claim to love them most treat them worst. In romantic relationships, your partner doesn't remain because of your shared history, because of the bond you formed, or because they made a promise. They remain because the relationship continues to satisfy their needs better than available alternatives. The moment this equation shifts, when they encounter someone who offers what you offer plus something additional, or when you cease providing what made the relationship worthwhile, the history becomes meaningless and the bond crumbles. This sounds severe until you examine your own behavior honestly. You've done the same. That friend you pulled away from, that ex you lost interest in, that hobby you dropped, you quit because the cost outweighed the benefit. You weren't evil. You were human. Everyone functions this way. The only question is whether you'll acknowledge it or keep pretending your feelings are purer than everyone else's. In professional relationships, your employer doesn't retain you because they value you as a person or because they're loyal to workers who've served them well. They retain you because replacing you costs more than keeping you in salary, time, knowledge loss, or organizational disruption. The moment this equation flips, you're gone. This is why long-tenure employees get terminated without hesitation when budgets shrink. The years of dedication, the personal sacrifices, the occasions you went beyond your job description. None of it counts. When the cost-benefit equation shifts, grasping this prevents the naive devastation of learning your employer never valued you personally. In family relationships, even family bonds, which we're taught are unconditional, function on exchange principles. Parents who offer financial support often receive caregiving in their later years. Siblings who were close growing up drift apart when their paths diverge. Family members who take more than they contribute find themselves steadily excluded from family gatherings. The exchange might be less transactional than professional relationships, but it remains exchange. And family members who break the implicit agreement, who take without giving, who create more problems than they resolve, who demand support without reciprocating eventually find themselves excluded regardless of blood ties. Machiavelli's insight: once you accept that all relationships are exchanges, you can stop being wounded by people acting according to the natural laws of exchange. Your focus moves from why did they betray me to what exchange sustained this relationship and what shifted. Truth 2: people test your boundaries constantly. Here's where Machiavelli becomes truly practical. He wrote, "Men never do good unless necessity compels them to it." His observation: humans instinctively probe boundaries to discover what they can get away with. When they meet firm resistance, they respect the boundary and the person maintaining it. When they meet weak resistance or none at all, they push harder. This isn't deliberate cruelty in most cases. It's unconscious behavioral economics. Humans are wired to conserve energy and maximize gain, which means they naturally drift toward taking more and giving less until they face consequences that render this strategy unprofitable. Observe this pattern in your relationships. The friend who always bails on plans at the last moment. They're testing whether you'll impose consequences or simply accept it. If you keep pardoning with no cost to them, they've discovered they can disrespect your time without repercussion. Why would they stop? You're showing them that your boundaries are flexible. The partner who talks disrespectfully to you, they're testing whether you'll endure it or declare it unacceptable. If you protest but ultimately tolerate the behavior, you've shown them that disrespect succeeds. They can vent their frustration on you without the risk of losing you. That's a valuable service you offer at your own expense. The colleague who claims credit for your work is testing whether you'll confront them or simply let it go. If you allow it once, they've discovered they can profit from your efforts without sharing any rewards. Rational self-interest says, do it again. The family member who only reaches out when they need something. They're testing whether you'll sustain the relationship despite the imbalance. If you continue giving without demanding reciprocity, you've shown them that one-sided taking is acceptable in this relationship. The mechanism Machiavelli identified: humans respect boundaries that are enforced, not boundaries that are merely stated. You can tell people all day long what you will and won't accept. What counts is what you tolerate when they test those limits. This is why the person who's perpetually accommodating, perpetually forgiving, perpetually understanding gets treated worse over time, not better. They've conditioned everyone around them to believe poor treatment carries no consequences. Meanwhile, the person who maintains firm boundaries, who will walk away, who will impose consequences, who means what they say earns consistent respect. Machiavelli wrote that being feared surpasses being loved because fear rests on consequences that don't depend on the other person's feelings or circumstances. They might stop loving you when it suits them. They won't stop respecting your boundaries as long as violating them costs more than it gains. The uncomfortable application. Every relationship where you feel disrespected or exploited, you are permitting it. You're showing people through your actions that they can treat you that way without losing access to you. The moment you impose real consequences, reducing contact, withdrawing support, ending the relationship, behavior shifts immediately or the person exits. Either way, you win by refusing to tolerate poor treatment any longer. Truth 3. Attraction dies without strategic distance. Machiavelli grasped something about power that applies directly to personal relationships. Complete accessibility destroys value and total transparency eliminates intrigue. He counseled princes to preserve elements of mystery, to remain somewhat unpredictable, and to never be entirely available or entirely knowable. In modern relationships, this principle operates mercilessly. The person who becomes entirely available, entirely transparent, and entirely merged into another's life stops being a separate entity worth pursuing and becomes a utility to be used. In romantic relationships, this explains why relationships often deteriorate after the moving in together phase. Not because proximity is inherently harmful, but because many people react to increased proximity by abandoning all independence, sharing everything, being available nonstop, and merging their whole life into the relationship. What occurs? The mystery vanishes. The person who was once intriguing becomes entirely known. The person who was once pursued becomes perpetually available. The distinct individual becomes an extension. And extensions aren't attractive, they're utilities. Observe how this manifests. Early in relationships, you both have rich lives. You have friends, hobbies, goals, and time apart. You share selectively. You preserve some mystery. The relationship is thrilling because you're two whole people choosing to share time together. Then you get serious. You drop your friends. You give up your hobbies. You share everything. You're available around the clock. You have no life beyond the relationship. You've gone from being a fascinating person they choose to spend time with to being someone whose entire existence centers on them. The result? They lose interest. Not because they're shallow or cruel, but because you've removed what made you attractive. The sense that you're a whole person with a full life who chooses to include them, not someone who needs them to have a life. Machiavelli noted that the prince who granted audiences to anyone who asked became less respected than the prince whose time was precious and scarce in relationships. The person who's perpetually available becomes taken for granted. The person who guards the scarcity of their time and attention stays valued in all relationships. This pattern reaches beyond romance. The friend who's always free whenever you call becomes the fallback friend you contact when better options aren't available. The professional who answers emails at 2 a.m. teaches people their time has no boundaries. The family member who always accommodates everyone else's needs becomes the one whose needs are never prioritized. Strategic distance isn't about playing games or being artificially unavailable. It's about preserving genuine independence, having a life, interests, and priorities that exist outside any single relationship. This makes you compelling because you're not merely a reflection of the other person. You're a distinct entity worth engaging with. Machiavelli would recognize this as fundamental power dynamics. The person who requires nothing from the relationship holds all the power. The person who's desperate for the relationship holds none. By preserving independence, emotional, social, practical, you avoid the desperate dependence that makes you unattractive and ensures poor treatment. The respect mechanism. Now we arrive at Machiavelli's most famous and most misunderstood observation. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Everyone fixates on feared and overlooks the real insight. Let me share his full reasoning. Love is preserved by the link of obligation, which owing to the baseness of men is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. But fear is sustained by a dread of punishment which never fails. Translation. People's affection for you hinges on you continuing to benefit them, which makes it fragile and dependent on circumstances. But people's respect for your boundaries is dependable because it's grounded in consistent consequences that don't shift with their feelings or situations. This has nothing to do with scaring people through threats or intimidation tactics. The point is that respect built on enforced boundaries proves more durable than affection built on advantages you offer. Here's the practical difference. The person everyone adores but nobody respects gets walked over repeatedly. People like spending time with them but never take them seriously. They cancel plans without feeling guilty. They request favors without returning them. They ignore boundaries because no consequences exist. The person everyone respects, even without being universally adored, receives good treatment consistently. People may not always seek their company, but they interact with them thoughtfully and carefully. They honor commitments. They give back. They honor boundaries because crossing them produces real consequences. Which position would you prefer in professional settings? The manager everyone adores for being pleasant and flexible earns the least respect and poorest results from their team. The manager everyone respects for being equitable yet firm achieves superior outcomes even without being as personally popular. In personal relationships, the one who always forgives, always understands, always offers another chance receives worse treatment over time. The one who maintains firm boundaries, repeat that behavior and we're finished, and genuinely follows through receives steady, consistent respect. The principle Machiavelli recognized: humans are driven by incentives. When mistreating you carries no penalty, anticipate continued mistreatment. When mistreatment brings reliable penalties, less access, removed support, severed relationships, anticipate improved treatment or those people filtering themselves from your life. Either result serves you well. You receive improved treatment or you remove people who refuse to treat you properly. What serves no purpose is accepting poor treatment endlessly while hoping others will decide to treat you well from sheer goodness. Machiavelli understood that expecting people to rise above their nature guarantees disappointment. Building relationships where self-interest coincides with treating you well creates a formula for success. The transformation protocol. Grasping these principles intellectually changes nothing by itself. Machiavelli did not compose theory. He recorded practices earned through painful experience. So here is how you put these principles into action to convert your relationships from sources of suffering and confusion into sources of strategic advantage. Step 1. The relationship audit. Review every meaningful relationship in your life and candidly evaluate what benefit does this individual gain from me? What benefit do I gain from them? Is the exchange balanced or lopsided? For unbalanced relationships where you contribute far more than you get back, 3 options exist. First, decrease your investment to match what you get. Second, openly renegotiate the terms to restore equilibrium. Third, terminate the relationship and channel that energy toward connections that are mutual. Most people decline to perform this audit because the findings are uncomfortable. You will find that many people you believe care about you are merely exploiting you. That numerous relationships you have invested heavily in go unreciprocated. That you have been signing up for exploitation because you accepted fairy tales about unconditional devotion. Conduct the audit regardless. Discomfort producing clarity beats comfort that enables continued exploitation. Step 2. Establishing your boundaries. For every relationship you retain, define what conduct you will and will not tolerate. Get specific here, and this part is critical. Decide precisely what repercussions will follow when boundaries get crossed. The repercussion must be something you will genuinely be willing to enforce. If you do that, I will feel upset is not a consequence. That is merely information others will dismiss if making you upset carries no meaningful cost for them. Genuine consequences look like this. If you cancel on me without adequate notice one more time, I will stop making plans with you, then genuinely follow through. The person who sets boundaries yet never enforces them has proven that their boundaries are meaningless. Step 3. Independence maintenance. Deliberately cultivate a life beyond every relationship. Develop friendships your partner does not share. Pursue interests that do not revolve around your family. Maintain professional ambitions that do not hinge on any single colleague's cooperation. This is not about contingency plans or preserving options for betrayal. It is about staying a whole person instead of becoming an extension of others. Whole people attract admiration and respect. Extensions get taken for granted and eventually cast aside. Step 4. The respect optimization. Quit trying to win everyone's approval. Focus on being worthy of respect. The distinction. Seeking approval means adapting to others' preferences even when they clash with your own. Earning respect means holding clear standards and maintaining them regardless of whether others agree. Ironically, earning respect increases how much worthy people appreciate you because such individuals gravitate towards strength and firm principles. Those who resent you for maintaining boundaries were never worth accommodating in the first place. Step 5. Cultivating exchange awareness. Quit pretending your relationships run on pure affection or devotion. Begin deliberately managing the exchanges. This does not make you manipulative. It makes you pragmatic. Consider this: what value am I contributing to this relationship? What value am I getting back? Can this be maintained over time? What would occur if I withdrew my contribution to the exchange? Relationships that withstand this scrutiny deserve your investment. Relationships that fail this test were ones that exploited you all along. Now for the counter-arguments. At this stage, you might be thinking, this is overly cynical. This destroys authentic connection. Not every relationship is transactional, or I don't operate this way with those I love. Let me respond to each. This is overly cynical. Cynicism means believing people are worse than they truly are. Realism means perceiving people as they genuinely are. Machiavelli wasn't cynical. He was observant. He recorded patterns, not theories. If those patterns seem cynical, that's because human nature is less admirable than we claim. This destroys authentic connection. On the contrary, it fosters authentic connection. When you abandon expectations of unconditional loyalty and instead build relationships on genuine exchange, you forge connections grounded in reality instead of fantasy. The friendships that endure this approach are authentic. Those that don't were never real to begin with. Not every relationship is transactional. Name one that isn't. Your closest friendship. What would occur if you became a perpetual burden with no reciprocal value? Your romantic partnership. What would occur if you completely stopped fulfilling your partner's needs? All relationships involve implicit exchange. Recognizing this doesn't produce it. Refusing to see it doesn't make it disappear. I'm not this way with people I love. Yes, you are. You simply don't notice it because society taught you that acknowledging self-interest in relationships is shameful. But look honestly, you remain in relationships that reward you more than they cost you. You fade from relationships that demand more than they return. You invest more in those who invest in you. This is self-interest. It's normal. It's healthy. Claiming otherwise is delusion, the ultimate liberation. Here's what Machiavelli's insight truly provides. Liberation from naive victimhood. Once you grasp that humans act from self-interest, you cease being shocked by betrayal. You cease being wounded by people behaving according to their nature. You stop demanding others sacrifice their interests for yours when you wouldn't do the same. This awareness doesn't render you heartless. It renders you strategic. You can still care profoundly about people while recognizing that their loyalty has boundaries shaped by circumstances and self-interest. You can still forge meaningful relationships while making sure those relationships benefit your interests as much as they benefit others. Those who grasp human nature can forge relationships that endure because they rest on sustainable mutual benefit rather than romantic illusions that crumble under pressure. Those who deny human nature keep getting blindsided by patterns that were entirely foreseeable to anyone who grasped what Machiavelli documented. The decision is yours. Keep believing people act from nobler motives than they truly do and continue being surprised when they follow self-interest, or embrace Machiavelli's observations about human nature and apply them to construct relationships that genuinely work because they're rooted in reality rather than wishful thinking. To close, Machiavelli died penniless in exile, condemned by the very people who practiced everything he described while claiming to operate from higher principles. His name became a slur. His writings were prohibited. Yet his observations on human nature have endured for 500 years because they portray reality with unsettling precision. People are self-interested. Loyalty is conditional. Relationships are exchanges. Boundaries dictate respect. Availability erodes attraction. These aren't moral pronouncements. They're observable patterns that function whether you recognize them or not. You can dismiss these truths and continue operating from naive beliefs about human goodness. Many people do. They are the ones perpetually wounded by betrayals they never anticipated, stunned by people behaving according to their nature, bewildered about why their loyalty goes unreciprocated. Or you can embrace these truths and apply them to forge relationships that genuinely serve you. You can find the rare individuals whose self-interest truly aligns with supporting you. You can set boundaries that earn respect. You can preserve the independence that sustains your attractiveness. You can build exchanges worth sustaining instead of one-sided arrangements that inevitably fall apart. Machiavelli provided you the map. The terrain hasn't shifted in 500 years. Whether you follow the map or keep wandering blindly is entirely your decision. The princes who understood human nature constructed empires that endured centuries. The princes who trusted in noble sentiments were overthrown and forgotten. In your own life, grasping these principles marks the difference between being exploited and being respected, between being discarded and being valued, between naive victimhood and strategic success. Welcome to reality. It's less comfortable than the fairy tale, but it's the only ground where genuine success is achievable.